Winnipeg edition because I'm visiting family in Winnipeg, so I'm recording this in Winnipeg as well. But I'm visiting virtually. I don't think I have any Masonic experiences at all in this state. I hope to change that soon. Worshipful Brother Lane from Maryland. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, I learned of you or learned about you through really interesting course I discovered on the Maryland Grand Lodge's website. I'll leave a link to it. It was you were listed as an instructor for the Masonic Law School. And I never heard of anything like that before. Obviously, there is such a thing as Masonic jurisprudence. Every now and then you'll hear of Masonic charges being brought. But the idea of a Masonic law school I thought was really interesting. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about what that is. What is a Masonic law school and what your role in it is?
All right, so at least in Maryland Masonry, there are 3 certifications that a man must receive in order to become Worshipful Master. The first is he must be certified in the 3 degrees of craft masonry, that he can deliver those degrees proficiently. The second is he has to go through a past master's degree. That's kind of like passing the Oriental chair, almost like a York Rite ceremony. And then the third is to pass the Masonic Law School exam. Basically, think of it like this. It is kind of like the circumpunct analogy or symbolism, a certain point within a circle, and that a brother starts off as an entered apprentice, and a circle is pretty small. Becomes a fellow craft, that circle becomes larger, all right, and then Master Mason, larger yet. In becoming the Worshipful Master, you have to grow even more in Masonry. It's kind of like before you can lead, you have to know what we're really all about, and you have to know what the laws of Maryland Masonry are, what you can do as Worshipful Master, what you cannot do. And so really the law school exam is an exam that studies Article 16 of our Constitution, and that's the laws that govern subordinate lodges in the state of Maryland. So it would have everything in there from how you'd have to dress as Worshipful Master. Can you be in a parade? What happens with Masonic charges? How do you handle that? Everything that you can think of that might come your way during your year as Worshipful Master is pretty much covered in Article 16, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. What is the actual, so on the website, on the calendar, it was listing the courses a day. So how long does the Masonic Law School last? How long of a course is it? And does it move around to different areas? I'm not sure how big Maryland is. Does it move to different places within Maryland, or is it one central location that everybody comes to?
It moves around in different places. I'm, in addition to being Worshipful Master of Queen City Lodge, I'm also the Vice President of the Board of Grand Inspectors for the Western region. And the law schools are basically taught by the Grand Inspectors. A Grand Inspector is a representative of the Grand Master in each jurisdiction. And so there's probably, and this is a guess, there's probably about 30 guys throughout the state of Maryland who are teaching the Masonic Law School. Basically, we meet about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. It runs till about noon. And it's a 2-day process. The first day is the first half of Article 16. The second day is the second half. And then you take your law school exam. And if you pass, then you get your certification for the law school portion of becoming a Worshipful Master.
And when has this been around in, like, how long has the Masonic Law School been a part of Maryland Freemasonry? Has it been around since you joined, or is it a relatively newer invention?
Well, I've been a Mason now for, I believe it's 12 years. It's been around since I've been around. I'm not sure, and I apologize, I'm not sure exactly when the edict came out that you'd have to pass Masonic Law School, but it's been around for quite some time. All the past masters that I know, going back until the 70s, had to take the law school exam.
What would you say are some of the benefits to not only having a Masonic Law School, but having a Masonic Law School that takes place in person? Because I'm aware of jurisdictions. We have in our jurisdiction, Ontario, there's an online course for district deputy. but that's all done kind of online. You can do it in person as well. But what are some of the advantages to actually doing a program in person? Because I'm sure people have brought up the idea of, you know, uh, creating an online version of the course or something to that effect. What benefits have you seen of the in-person aspect of it?
Well, first of all, I guess your question is kind of a two-part question. The first is, what are the benefits of a law school to begin with? And I think I kind of maybe jumped the gun a little bit and kind of answered that. I think if you got to be a Mason, you really have to know what we stand for. All right. What does Masonry stand for? It's just not enough to, go through the degrees. And I don't know how you guys do it there in Essex, but, we have a catechism and we return a portion of what we heard and saw that night in the form of a catechism. To me, and this is my personal belief, it's just not enough to sit there, take it in, and regurgitate it. You really got to know what we stand for, especially if you're going to be Worshipful Master. And that Article 16 gives a very definite, specific, detailed look about the running of a lodge. And while it's not ritual, all right, it does teach, I think, some very valuable lessons about circumscribing our desires and keeping our passions in due bounds, if that makes sense. So in person, brother, I'm one of those type of guys that I'd rather speak to you face to face, all right, than over the internet or on the phone. It's really person to person. It really gives the guys. It's not a very big class. There's usually maybe 3 or 4 guys in my law school class. So it's a kind of a laid back atmosphere, and it allows you to talk and ask questions, that might come up during our discussions, that you might not feel comfortable, talking online or over the phone about. And, just that brotherly connection of, being able to say, well, Sam, if this happens, how do I handle it? All right. And we go to Article 16, we look it up. But brother, laws and Masonry, common sense really rules the day. And it's just a face-to-face, I think, is a more laid back, relaxed atmosphere where we can talk reality, talk common sense, and talk how to apply Article 16 to what they may face. And I've kind of seen it all here in Cumberland. So usually I can answer their, whatever question they may have if something comes up.
Now, I know you mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to clarify. So is the entirety of the law school focused on Article 16, or either formally or informally, during a law school, will other concerns, topics, questions be brought up that may relate to what that, soon to be Worshipful Master will face during his time in the East?
So the law school class is focused on Article 16. That's what the test is going to be all about. That's what they have to pass. All right. But invariably, it becomes, talking about old war stories. All right. I've seen this happen. How would you handle that? And try to impress upon the guys, the first place you look is the Constitution, Article 16. The second place you go to is your Grand Inspector. The third place, your Vice President of Grand Inspectors, then your President of Grand Inspectors, and if you have to keep on going, to the Grand Master of Masons in Maryland. So it gives them the first look of where they need to go. And I'm not, when I teach this class, I don't expect them to memorize or learn word for word everything that's in that Article 16, but just to have a common recognition that they can find it in there, where to find it, all right, and how to interpret the law, because interpretation is sometimes confusing as well.
It is. Interpreting. Sure, you've seen it in many aspects of your life, right? The words on the page are the words on the page, but how they are interpreted can often, differ wildly depending on the person and the circumstances and the context. But without that, there'd be no need for lawyers.
Very true.
But that does bring up the interesting point about interpretation, and this is something that I've struggled with a lot, primarily during COVID, to be honest, but during during my Masonic journey, and I think I've seen other people struggle with it too, is there's so much ritual out there, Masonic ritual. And there's so many, I think there's probably over 1 million words. If you count all the ritual, not just the craft degrees, but Scottish Rite, York Rite, different jurisdictions with different degrees. When it comes to trying to make a decision and trying to base that decision on Masonic principles, how do you properly interpret, or what advice would you give to trying to interpret the ritual and trying to make sense of it? Because, not to get into a controversial topic, but during, for example, COVID, I had Masonic brothers on both sides of the debates about lockdowns and vaccines and all the rest of it, using Masonic ritual to try to justify their positions. And it's like you're looking at the same words but interpreting it very differently. And and that's just always been my concern more lately. How do we make sure we're, interpreting the works, the ritual, as properly as we can?
Well, that is the key, right, brother? I mean, realize that in law school, we're not interpreting ritual. We're interpreting law. All right. So I think, and so I'm going to speak for myself when it comes to interpreting ritual. I think that every man comes to Masonry with his own ideas, own morality, if that's the right word, and how they view any type of subject. What one section of a ritual may mean to you may be something completely different when another brother listens to it, tries to interpret it, and study it. I'm also a member, I'm also a Worshipful Master of Esoteric Lodge of Research here in Cumberland. And that's a lot of what we do is we, pick out ritual, and one brother will write a paper on it, all right, and then argue over it, all right, try to come up to some meaning, some that we can all hang on to. And invariably, everyone has different ideas about what those words mean. There are I don't know that, and I apologize, brother, I don't know that much about Canadian Masonry. But here in Maryland, we still follow the landmarks, Mackey's landmarks of Masonry. So that's one place, that I always look at and refresh myself, all right, about what it means. What are the landmarks of Masonry? What have I raised my right hand or placed my hand on the Bible and take an obligation to? I don't know if that I can answer your question, brother, how to interpret Masonry. I think, having conversations with informed brothers, as many of those as you can, and just try to do, and I know this sounds very simplistic, try to do what's right. What's the right thing every time? All right. That's how I try to live my life. I do study our ritual. It does have a very real place in my life, but as far as saying that my way is the right way and how to interpret and argue that, brother, I don't know that I can do that.
I don't know if anybody can do it fully, but I think you did a pretty good job with that answer. One thing I love about the East Coast in the States is, traveling. Like I was in where was I? Philadelphia, right? And that is like, I can travel half an hour, no, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'm in New Jersey, New York. You've got Maryland. You've got all the different, it's so fun because you can travel to the whole tri-state area, New Jersey. I'm not sure how big Maryland is off the top of my head, but I'm guessing you're able to travel a lot to other states, other jurisdictions along the coast, and I'm sure other places. When you're traveling, does the Masonic Law School ever come up in other jurisdictions? Do they have similar things? Or if not, has anybody expressed interest in trying to start something similar?
Brother, sitting in Cumberland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia are minutes from me. All right. And we do a lot of traveling, especially to a lodge in Pennsylvania, Myersdale Lodge 154. And, it's always amazing to watch other brothers do the work, because Pennsylvania is nothing like Maryland ritual at all. And it's fascinating. We really haven't discussed Masonic, at least the lodges that I visited in those states and other states. You're the first person that's ever reached out to me who wanted to talk about Masonic Law School. I mean, it's not a very sexy, area of Masonry. All right. It can get kind of dull unless you love reading and interpreting statutes. So no, unfortunately, no one has ever, reached out to me, say for you, to talk about it.
I mean, is it well known? Because I never knew it existed. It was purely the name that caught me off, pretty much caught me by surprise when I was, because I try to keep up with what's happening in other jurisdictions, and every month so go on and see. And, I've never heard of a Masonic law school. My initial thought was it was related to how to deal with when Masonic charges are brought up against a brother. So I don't know, maybe other jurisdictions would know about it, but the name is what really first attracted me to it and got me curious.
Well, there definitely is a section regarding Masonic trials and how to advance those things once a complaint is made. Within our Constitution, you have the articles of the Constitution, and you also have a digest and edicts of the Grand Lodge, and they all kind of play off one another. So while there's information within our Constitution about how to handle Masonic trials, you really have to look to other places, especially that digest portion of the Constitution, because that lays out the procedural due process of Masonic trials.
And I really like what you said. I'm hoping you can expand on it a little bit. You use the phrase boring, right? Or use the word boring. It's a boring.
Right.
But one thing that I've really been pushing lately within my lodge and within this podcast is, the boring stuff matters too. A lot of what I've been seeing, and I think this relates to COVID, to be honest, in a weird way. During when meetings weren't done in person, when we switched to pretty much virtual meetings, our Grand Lodge put out a blanket dispensation allowing the master, secretary, and treasurer to do the administrative work amongst themselves, basically, without needing to call every member to get a vote, because we weren't meeting in person. And what I've seen is, and this seems to be happening in a lot of jurisdictions, all the quote unquote boring or administrative work, the paying of the bills, the correspondence, even after lodges return to meeting in person, that type of stuff has kind of still remained the domain of secretaries, treasurers, masters, and the membership has kind of taken on this attitude a little bit of I don't want to worry about the boring stuff. I'll come for degrees, I'll come for refreshments, I'll come, but if it's actually a if it's a detail, if it's a boring item, I'm not going to worry about it. I've even had Masons suggest to me we do away with business meetings altogether, and just have degrees, social nights, and then one meeting a year we're putting in new officers. And I use an example with an interview I just did. There was no toilet paper in the at the temple one day in the washroom stalls, and nobody knew where to get it because nobody had paid attention to that really small little thing.
Right.
Because it's always one person who's kind of always doing it because it was a detail, right? I really think Freemasons at the membership level, it need to start paying a bit more attention to some of those quote unquote boring things, because those things really are important to maintaining the craft.
And I would absolutely agree with you, but that's the crux, isn't it, bro? I mean, I don't know how Masonry in Canada is doing, but Masonry in Maryland, our numbers keep on dropping. And so how do you entertain and still expound the philosophies and principles that we stand for, that makes us Masons and not Elks, and that's no offense to our Elk brothers out there, I didn't mean it that way, but what makes us truly Masons? How do you do that? The little things are important, all right? Because I think I previously said, if we are going to be who we say we are, right, we have to know who we are. And those boring things are a very important part. As Worshipful Master in a Maryland Lodge, I can't vote on anything unless it's a tiebreaker. All right. It's all the lodge's decision. So you guys got to know, if we're going to be good stewards of our lodge and good stewards of Masonry, you may not have to know all the ritual if it's not your desire to be Worshipful Master, but you better know, all right, where to find the toilet paper. You better know how to open the doors and turn on the lights, how to interact with new brothers who are there and really don't know anything and are feeling strange. All right. How to bring them in and make them feel part of Masonry. And so, the little boring things, they're just a necessary evil of our craft, but they are so very important if we're going to know who we are as Masons.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, you said something interesting, which I would, you said something that's kind of a common sentiment, which I would push back a little bit on. Mm-hmm. You mentioned, how do we be entertaining, but also deal with the stuff that needs to be dealt with, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, and this has been the approach I think that Freemasonry has taken. I'm not sure that Freemasonry should be entertaining or fun. And what I mean by, and people always look at me funny when I say that, because I don't think that Freemasonry in the sense of fun or enjoyment can compete with Netflix, can compete with, there's always going to be something that's both easier and more entertaining to do in the moment. Mm-hmm. But there's few things that are going to be more fulfilling. So I've likened it, the example I've used in the past is exercise. I'm a very lazy human being. I don't like to exercise. I'd rather not. But my doctor has told me that if I don't exercise, because my family has a history of high blood pressure and cholesterol and all that I'm going to be in some trouble. So I do it not because I enjoy it, but because I recognize it's important to my well-being. And when it comes to Freemasonry, people have asked why I get so upset with dropping numbers, dropping attendance. It's because it really is important for the world, I think, and I don't mean to sound saccharine, but it's important for the world that Freemasonry survives and grows. Just the most recent interview I did was with somebody from Kentucky, the Grand Master of Kentucky, actually, talking about the benefits that Masonic ritual can have for a brother suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. Right. Mm. And I've talked about, if you don't want to go to a degree because you've seen 500 degrees and you're not going to enjoy it, you don't have to enjoy it, because it might be your 500th degree you've seen, but it's the first degree for that candidate. And for you to be there for him is more important than your enjoyment in that moment. And I just think I used this example before, and I don't mean to say anything negative about our Australian Masonic brothers, who are wonderful people, but they put out this advertisement, and they talked about, Freemasonry is great because you can have a beer with the boys, you can meet new people. Mm-hmm. And my thinking was, well, you can do that without Freemasonry, but how many organizations can you join that can help a brother with Alzheimer's fight off the effects of Alzheimer's and give him a few more years? Like, I think the emphasis needs to switch from how do we make this entertaining to how do we communicate the meaningfulness of what we do and the benefits to the world.
I mean, I think that's a great point. Perhaps the word entertaining is misplaced. So I think I agree with you. How do you make it part of your heart, part of your being, part of everything that you're about? And how do we get, especially the young kids, all right, how do we get them to know or see that opportunity is there, joining this brotherhood that really is about service, all right? Service to our brothers, to God, mankind, and the feeling, that you get from your gut every time that you do a Masonic thing, whether it be ritual, whether it be helping out a brother, whether it be going down to the animal shelter and, building a fence. All right. Wearing that square and compass over your heart. Why is that important? So I think you're right. I think my use of the term entertainment is misplaced. How do we
But
get it
no,
to meaning?
in fairness though, I've heard it a lot. I've heard, if not entertainment, synonyms for it. Like it's a very common refrain. How do we make lodge meetings interesting, entertaining, fun? Fun comes up a lot. We need to make things more
Mhm.
fun. And I always sound like a killjoy when I say, well, let's not worry about making them fun, because I don't know if we can make it more fun than what's out there, but it is by its nature, I think, more meaningful than what's out there. And that's,
Mhm.
if we lean into that, even something small like um, when we're doing a donation, say to a Masonic charity,
Mhm.
do the brothers actually know what that Masonic charity is, what it does,
Right.
why, or is it just the bill is paid as a matter of course and no one has any idea where that money's actually going or what it's doing?
Yeah. I mean, perfect point. Knowing who we are and what we do and why we do it. Maybe that's the thing. Why we do it. All right. Is the thing that we need to get across.
I agree completely. Why we do any of the things we do, it's so important. Now, going back to the Masonic law schools,
Mhm.
so is it um I was going to say by invitation only, but or so at the start of the year, do the next incoming worshipful masters get a letter stating, you are to attend this Masonic law
Mhm.
school this date, or does it schedule within their schedules? Like, how does the actual registration process work?
So what'll happen is I will reach out to the president of the board of grand inspectors, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to hold in the Western region my Masonic law school October 8th, and then 2 weeks later, whatever the date that is, October 20 something, I believe, 22nd. He'll put out a basically mass flyer or notice to all the worshipful masters in the Western region. Lane is holding his law school on the 8th and the 22nd. All right. That worshipful master then will make sure that his successor is signed up with me and gets there on time every time to take this Masonic class. Because one of the duties of a worshipful master is to have his successor take over after his 1 year period. So it's on me to set it. It's on the current worshipful master to make sure that his successor gets there. Now, also in Maryland, not only are incoming worshipful masters obligated to take the law school, but the senior warden is also obligated to take the law school, but he does not have to take the exam until he's going to be worshipful master. So there should be senior wardens and incoming senior wardens and incoming worshipful masters at these law schools.
And is there a time limit or certification limit? So if somebody, say, was a worshipful master or went to Masonic Law School in 2008 and became a worshipful master in 2009, and now
Mhm.
is looking at returning to the chair in 2023, does he have to take the course again? Is there a limit at which point, you have to be recertified?
Right. No, well, not for the law school. All right. There's been a lot of talk at the annual and semi-annuals about the certification in the ritual. If there's been some years since you've been worshipful master, I believe it's 2 years. If you've been absent from the Oriental chair for 2 years, you may have to recertify in the ritual. But once you take the law school exam and get certified as worshipful master, then that's good. Now, if I'm a senior warden who is going to go through the class, and I decide I'm going to take the law school exam and I pass, that certification is good for 2 years. So you'd have to be in as worshipful master within 2 years of taking that exam.
And do you ever have, or even from, I don't even know if it's open to them or not, but do you ever have brothers who are, lower than senior warden who express interest in attending just to learn about? Do you keep it focused on the masters and senior wardens?
No, we've had guys who aren't interested in chairs at all. We've had stewards who say, "Hey Sam, can I come to the class?" Yeah, absolutely. You're more than welcome. All right. The main focus is going to be on my guys that need to certify. All right. But everyone is welcome to sit down and talk about Article 16 and go through it. So yeah, I've had guys who do not have no ambition to be a worshipful master or any other chair come on. And I've also had past masters and some Grand Lodge members come to law schools as well.
I'm really happy to hear that, because I know that's a wonderful thing to make sure anybody who is interested can jump in. I'm sure it makes the courses more enjoyable as well, to have a variety of people there.
Yeah, everyone, with their interpretation again. All right. And when it comes down to it, you got to pass a test. So at least for that, my interpretation is the only one that matters at that particular point in time. But it is interesting to hear how brothers read the law and interpret the law. Like there's one thing that we always have an argument with, and it's taking up the Grand Masonic word. All right. In the Constitution, it reads, only the worshipful master shall take up the Grand Masonic word. All right. And then the question is, well, what happens if the worshipful master is not there that night and the senior warden is acting as worshipful master? He's worshipful master for that night. Can he take up the Grand Masonic word? All right. My interpretation of the Constitution was no, he cannot. Only the worshipful master can take up the Grand Masonic word. And I was teaching a leadership school at the Grand Lodge a couple of years back, and the Grand Master happened to be in the room. All right. And that came up. All right. And so I gave my interpretation, and I was feeling pretty strong about it and feeling pretty comfortable. And he told me I was absolutely wrong. That a senior warden sitting as worshipful master that night is worshipful master, and he can take up the Grand Masonic word. So, little things like that one I get a little bit excited about, especially when I'm arguing with Grand Masters. All right. And of course, since he's the 800 pound gorilla, his opinion counted that day, not mine. But, that type of thing is just little things. I'm surprised that what guys pick up on and say, well, what about that? All right. It says, in Maryland, we wear tuxedos to lodge. But the Constitution describes what a worshipful master must wear. He must wear a silk top hat. He must wear a bow tie. He must wear a dark suit. It doesn't say tuxedo. All right. Guys will pick up on that because they hate wearing tuxedos. All right. And yeah, you can wear a dark suit. You don't have to wear the tuxedo. But it just interests me a great deal what guys pick up on and what's important to people.
And I always find that fascinating too, right? And I think that's even though Masonry doesn't have to be fun, one of the fun parts, if you're really get into it, is how different people interpret, the Constitution and the ritual and how they move forward with it. And that can be a really enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm.
Just finishing off with this Masonic Law School, one thing, and I'm sure you have this as well, I'm a pretend lawyer. I went to law school and I got my license. I don't practice, so I'm not a real lawyer. But
you're a real lawyer, brother. You sat in that chair and you got the degree. You're there.
There you go. I did that. I went that far. And I'm sure you got it as well. In Ontario, to be licensed, you have to do a certain number of hours. I forget the number of continuing education credits they're called, where you have to take courses. You have to show that you're keeping up with the you're keeping up with whatever you need to keep up with. I think it's like 10 hours a year. I think I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wondered why there isn't something similar for Freemasonry, in the sense that can a member show a certain amount of activity within a year to demonstrate that they're still engaged with the craft? Because especially somebody could have joined 1985. There's been a lot of changes since they joined.
Mm-hmm.
Are they up to date on those? Do they know what they are? And it could be activity in terms of attending meetings. It could be, though, something like the Masonic Law School, or something that's designed not so much focusing on Article 16, but on the Constitution in general. I've just always thought there needs to be some room for, if you view Mason as a kind of professional designation, are you keeping up with are you keeping up with the changes in the craft, and can you show that you're keeping up with them? Otherwise, you might be practicing ritual that is out of date 3 or 4 times.
Mhm. Well, you know, that's another reason why Maryland has the certifications, right? You got the law school certification, you got the ritual certification, you got the past master certification. You know, brother, I could see it in your face in our conversation. All right, and I think I follow you. You're one of those guys who live masonry every single day. All right, it's that important, and that's fantastic. And I think it'd be great if there were CRE classes for being a Mason. All right. But, you know, we also talk about masonry is not to interfere with your family, your work. All right. Each Mason is free to put into masonry what he feels. Right. All right. So I don't know that forcing a CRE class. All right. On guys who
CRE is continuing education type thing.
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's our continuing education thing. On guys who, I'm a Mason because I want to work in the kitchen. I want to clean the plates. I want to hang with the guys. I don't really care that much about ritual, but I want to be a Mason. All right, and their service is just as important as your and my service. Of, you know, I don't know about you, but I go to lodge probably 4 times a night. All right, the wife never sees me. I'm always at lodge, whether it be Scottish Rite, York Rite, Esoteric Lodge, whatever. But this, you know, there's a guy out there who all he wants to do is, you know, be of service. He wants to pour the wine. He wants to clean off the dishes. He wants to, you know, kind of be in the background. We had a catfish rodeo this summer. All right. We took it over from an organization that had been doing it for 75 years. And the fellas didn't want to do it anymore. So Potomac Lodge and Queen City Lodge and Eastgate Lodge, we stepped up and we said, yeah, this is the oldest running catfish rodeo in the state of Maryland. We're not going to let it die. It's for the kids. We're going to do it. And brother, I had guys who I haven't seen in years. All right. From Queen City Lodge saying, hey, can I measure fish? Hey, can I help a kid, you know, learn how to fish? All right. And I'm kind of getting off our track. I know. And brother, I see where you're coming from with, you know, continuing education in masonry. I don't know that would work though, brother. Right? And how we do it, I hope how we try to do it here in Maryland is, you know, we have Esoteric Lodge of Research and we have Maryland Lodge of Research here in Maryland. One's in Western Maryland, one's on Eastern Maryland. And we hold, you know, programs. We hold Esotericon here in Western Maryland, where we invite everyone to come and listen to a couple of papers. We have, you know, a big lunch. Then more papers in the afternoon and end it on a festa board. And, you know, that's kind of like our continuing education type here in Western Maryland. I see where you're coming from, but I think it'd be tough to force people to recertify, if that makes any sense.
I'm just trying to imagine a bunch of cowboys riding catfish. I don't know how that would work, but I would very much like to see a catfish.
Yeah, that was probably the funnest time I've had in masonry. See, we had close to 1,000 kids fishing. All right. And the little girl who won it, if she was 2 foot tall, all right, her catfish was bigger than she was. It was just a fantastic time.
I'm surprised the catfish didn't pull her in the water. I would be.
Yep.
So what is happening? What is the plan for, you know, Freemasonry in Maryland coming up? What type of events? Because I know your Grand Lodge is coming up very soon. I think in like 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Our annual communication is November something.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, the Grand Lodge always has something going on, whether it be a family picnic, a golf tournament, a fun run they call Storm the Castle. Here in Western Maryland, we used to have something called the Western Maryland Music Festival. But unfortunately, we didn't have that with COVID and stuff like that. That kind of ended large groups of people coming out to have fun and listen to music. As far as activities, I know that, you know, we get involved in the Whiskey Rebellion. All right, started in this area in Pennsylvania. And I know there's a big Whiskey Rebellion celebration that our Scottish Rite will be a part of. I know we're doing a lot of traveling to different lodges. On Tuesday, we're going to Meyersdale, Pennsylvania again. Our York Rite is, the Commandery will be celebrating its 150th year soon. So there'll be a big celebration for that. That's pretty much, the different types of things that we got going. There's, individual charity things and low veils, which are always fun. But that's what we got going for the rest of the year.
Very well. I hope I get a chance to, like I said, I don't think I've ever visited any Masonic lodges or temples in Maryland. And I would very much love to get the chance. So hopefully I can, maybe this year, if not this year, as soon as I can. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and also for all the work that you do. I spoke to Grand Lodge of Maryland and asked about it, and they said that you do excellent work with it. And just talking to you, I think it's a really cool thing, and I'm hoping other Masonic jurisdictions, some have similar type of things, some don't. I'm hoping more Masonic jurisdictions consider things such as the Masonic Law School, because I think certification, especially when you start to get up to those chairs, up looking at the East, I think it's a really valuable tool. So thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. If you ever find yourself in Western Maryland, please give me a shout. We'd love to have you at a meeting. I'm very proud of our temple. I think it's the most beautiful temple, except for the Grand Lodge, in the state of Maryland. So you're more than welcome anytime. And if any of your viewers or listeners, or you want to talk more about Masonic law or jurisprudence, I love talking about it. So always feel free to give me a shout.
I will leave a link to the Grand Lodge in the description so they can get in touch with you.
All right, brother. Thank you very much.